Hello, everyone. Good evening from the great city of Barcelona. My name is Ayal, and I'm the Vice President of Partnership of the Esade Energy and Environment Club. I'm excited to welcome all of you to the first joint event we're having tonight, together with the London Business School. Together, we will host alumni from both schools who will share their stories throughout the MBA to their current positions in the sector, and will tackle the current challenges that the companies they work for are currently facing. The event is brought to you by the Career Centers of LBS and Esade University departments that support students and alumni in our overall career journey. Monique Davis and Naomi Williams partnered with us from the Energy and Environment Clubs. We are a student-led initiative driving the knowledge sharing among peers in the energy sector. Angel Gurria, the OECD Secretary General, said that investing in water security is a key drive of sustainable growth, benefiting local communities as well as the environment through the climate change is essential in light of the decrease in clean water sources access. The challenges faced by both developed and developing countries, but differ on the level of required investment and on the target spending of the funds. Investing in the mitigation of water-related risks affect economic growth and stability, which in return affect the wealth of a country and its ability to afford further investments in water accessibility or in infrastructure in general. The energy sector also relies on water, whether for hydroelectrical power, manufacturing process of fossil fuels, cooling of power plants, and more. The current water consumption in the industry accumulates to about 15% of the global freshwater consumption, and is expected to increase by 20% until 2035. The growing population increase the demand for water supply as well as the demand for energy, which on one hand puts more pressure on the available water resources, but also allows the opportunity for indirect investment to help manage the water risk. The Wind-Penny report of the high-level panel on financing infrastructure for a water-secure world predicts that social perception and response to water-related risks, increase in awareness, innovation, and the impact of climate change will be the main future drivers of the water infrastructure investment needs. Thanks to the OECD report on water growth and finance policy for the information. Without further ado, I pass the mic to my colleague from LBS, Ignacio Atabal of Spain, who will mediate tonight's discussion. Ignacio worked as a consultant in the energy sector, and he will introduce our speakers for tonight.
Thank you very much, Ayal, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the first event in our Career in Energy series, organized in collaboration between LBS and Esade. Before starting our discussion, which we really hope you will enjoy, just a little bit of housekeeping. So if you want to ask questions, which we really hope you want, feel free to just post them on the YouTube comments section, and we will direct them to either of our panelists. And now, without further ado, let's get to the most exciting part of the night, which is our two amazing panelists, Roman and Ankit, who have very generously offered their time to share with us their experiences pursuing a career in the energy sector. First, we've got Roman Oyarthun. He's an MBA 2018 from LBS, and he is currently a vice president at Susi Partners, a leading private fund management investing in infrastructure for the energy transition.
Hi, welcome, Ignacio.
Really
good afternoon, everyone.
Next, we've got Ankit Vatia, who's an MBA 2016 from Esade and is currently a manager at customers and sales support at OTT Hydromet, a company providing solutions to improve the sustainability of our environment. Welcome, Ankit. Thank you very much for being here. Really looking forward to learning more about your career at OTT.
Thank you.
So, as an opening question, directed to both of you, could you please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit more about your jobs, about Susi Partners in Roman's case and OTT Ankit's case, and maybe share with us as our first question the most exciting energy trend you see developing maybe in the next 3 to 5 years. Maybe Roman can go first.
Sure, I'll go first. Well, Suzy Partners, first of all, is a Swiss infrastructure fund manager specialized in sustainable energy investments, as Ignacio was saying. We're based in Zurich mainly. We have about 1.5 billion euros investor commitments across 6 funds. And they were able to invest in energy generation, energy efficiency enhancements, and storage as well. I'm part of the equity investment team. I joined Suzy Partners in 2018 when I finished my MBA at London Business School. To tackle your question, Ignacio, you said, what is the most exciting energy trend? I would say that at least what's exciting for me, my experience has been mainly in investing in the more traditional renewable energy asset type, so wind and solar. I'm just starting now to do energy storage investments. And that for me is quite interesting because it's a new technology. It's a completely different way to underwrite investments and to look at them. And frankly, I find it a lot harder. It's much more volatile than a solar park or a wind park. Why is it exciting technology? It's, I think, the natural intermittence of solar and wind, right? So if the sun isn't shining or if the wind isn't blowing, we're not producing electricity. What storage can do, it can sort of plug that gap that we have, right? Because batteries can discharge when the traditional energy generation assets cannot do so. So I think it's definitely a focus of the sector. And I think it's something that I would personally like to further look into.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Thank you for sharing your experience at Suzy Partners. I think one of the great things about this panel is that we're going to have 2 very different views about the energy and environment sector. Obviously, Roman from a more financial sort of point of view, and Ankit from a more corporate point of view. So Ankit, I'm very keen to hear about your experience at OTT, your experience to date, what your job looks like, and then again, if you want to share what you think is the most exciting trend you see developing in the next few years as a starter, that'd be great.
First of all, thank you, Ayal and Ignacio, for the wonderful introduction. So I am Kunwar Ankit Vatia, and I've been working for Odd Hydromet, which is a daughter company for Danaher Corporation. Many people know Danaher Corporation as a big conglomerate. So I'm working for Odd Hydromet in their water quality platform. Water quality platform at Danaher does about $2.5 billion in revenue, and I'm working for one of the companies which works particularly in the hydrology, meteorology, and solar segments. Overall, Odd Hydromet looks around about $150 million company as of 2020. And of course, it's been growing, even despite COVID. We haven't really seen the headwinds, especially in our sectors, because we see a big push in people and industries moving towards renewables. So I'm managing a team of 25 people all across the world now, mostly centered in Europe, where our production facilities are around Germany and the Netherlands, and also in Austria. And of course, we have some people representing us in North America and India as well. So we're focusing on high growth markets because we do see a push in investments from countries like India and China as we move forward. And of course, if I want to share a couple of exciting energy trends, I think Roman has touched upon that already. I think digitization and smart storage is the key. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk nowadays around the Internet of Energy and how they're going to use smart grids to better distribute energy. And I think that's important because I think 25% of all global emissions come from the energy sector. And I think we've been moving year over year for the last 5 years, and I think that trend is only going to accelerate. So I think decarbonization is going to continue, and of course, storage and digitization is going to become more and more important in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's very interesting. So now diving deeper into the careers aspect of this talk, it'd be really, I think, insightful for everyone who might be listening to us, most of them will be MBA students, as I am at the moment. So it'd be very interesting to see why and how did you decide you wanted to pursue a career within the energy sector? Did you know you wanted to be in the energy sector when you got to the MBA, or was it during the MBA you found something amazing about the energy sector and decided to pursue a career here?
Should I go?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I always had the idea to go into renewable energy before the MBA. I decided that before LBS simply because, well, first I wanted to be in a sector, have a career in a sector that was, to me, interesting. So, I mean, I think it's safe to say that we are undergoing an energy revolution at the moment. So being part of that, I think attracted me to it, and I think it also attracts the right kind of professional, right? Because in any revolution and any rapid change in industry, it requires that you learn quickly, because we don't know very well where we're heading towards. You need to challenge the way things operate at the moment. So that makes things exciting, and it makes the people that want to work in that sector also more interesting. Also, I guess the fact, if it's something that appeals to you, the whole climate change topic, so being able to say in my day-to-day, my professional career, I'm contributing in a very small way to, an issue that we will face, future generations will face. Well, it gives you that little bit of motivation, when you're working long days and you're just fed up with everything. At least you know that you're doing something that's good. I don't know, Ankit, does this also motivate you a little bit, or?
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah.
I was doing some research over the last couple of days, and just judging the amount of carbon footprint that the industry has, and it's north of 25%. So and of course, things haven't been moving in the right direction, at least globally, for the last couple of years. But I think with the new administration coming in the U.S., and of course with the signing of the environmental deals, I think we're going to have a shift in the right direction, at least over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's something which is exciting, because I do believe that the time is running out for us to act upon our energy footprint in the world. And I think going back home, as Roman, you said, just realizing that, what we do makes a difference in the world, and it's not just going to affect us, but of course future generations as well, because this is an ongoing activity which will remain with us, not just for our lifetime, but I think even much beyond that. So of course those things are interesting, and of course the size of the energy industry is appropriate for MBA students like you. I think the salaries that we expect are, let's say, affordable by the energy industry because of its maturity. So that also was a pull for me. And of course, I had family ties into the energy industry as well. My mother used to work for one of the biggest refiners in India called Indian Oil. So that was a soft spot for me as well.
So we could say you're an energy professional born from the beginning, right?
Yep, let's say that.
So then I think this leads into my next question really well, which is, what role did the MBA play in your career towards a job in energy? What sort of skills did you acquire during your MBA that you think were helpful both during recruiting and now during your professional career?
I'll go first on that one. So I think the wide array of subjects that we study in the MBA, and now I've been almost 3 years out of the MBA. After Esade, I did an exchange stint in Cornell as well, and the things that we learned there, especially around the topics that we didn't know going to the MBA. For me, it was finance and accounting. I studied intensively around those topics, and in the corporate world, even though I'm working in the energy sector, every day we talk about financial topics like account receivables, customers paying, cash collection topics, and those things are important even for you in managerial positions. If you start off your career, generally people out of the MBA start off as either energy consultants or analysts. But when you start off in those positions, what we're aiming for ideally, and what I was aiming for in particular over the next 2 to 3 years was a managerial position to grow up the ladder and to have that general management position. And of course, the program that I am in Danaher is called the General Manager Development Program. So it does facilitate me switching between roles. So the last role I had was in sales. Now I'm running a team out of sales operations, and hopefully, I will keep hopping around the business to explore different roles and to prepare myself for a general manager position. So I think the subjects that we learn, the teamwork that we learn, I think managing a team is one of the most difficult, let's say, skills that one will learn, easy way or the hard way. And I think, those kind of things in the MBA collaboration, team building activities, and of course the subjects that we learn, which are outside of our previous realm, really do help, open our minds and be prepared for whatever challenges lie ahead in careers in the energy sector and in general management positions. But Roman, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Sure. So, touching on some of the things you said, for me, how did LBS or the MBA help me get to where I am? I'd say one is a critical thinking aspect. The second one is sort of the platform to get there. So on the critical thinking aspect, I think this touches on the points you're making, Ankit. I think, there's a lot of courses that we take that I hadn't taken that kind of course before, where you're really challenged, in the strategy or how you're going to tackle an issue. So, being very aware of the importance of critical thinking, and then, being with peers that have very different views on how to tackle things and think also differently. I think this is something that I realize now that I was benefiting from back in the MBA. And it's something that I definitely, think as a plus of the MBA nowadays as an investor, where every single thing that I do requires thought. And, it's nothing is mechanical. I'm not shooting out anything without really thinking about it. And the other part is actually a more practical thing, which is just having the platform to get into a sector in an industry that I was not part of before the MBA. So before the MBA, I was working in New York, doing investment banking. So you work many hours and you actually have very little time to explore a career outside of what you're currently doing. Even more so if you want to jump to private equity, or you want to jump into the renewable energy sector, which I was not part of. So, in a more practical term, LBS, what it does, or the MBA, what it does, it gives you time. It gives you time to prep, to fine tune your critical thinking if you'd like. And it gives you access to people that can help you get that job, which is actually how I, ended up at Suzy Partners, and we can talk about that later on, Ignacio. I think it's one of your questions.
Yeah, there's actually a question on the chat from Deepak that I think be interesting to see any thoughts from your side, Roman, which is if there's any specific elective in LBS you suggest to take on the energy side of career. Then I'll pass this, if you can.
Well, I took the energy elective that was, the professor was Derek Bunn. So that's an elective that sort of gives you the, a basis for understanding how the energy sector works. What I found more interesting for me, which is not related to the energy sector, are actually the strategy courses. And I think those are core courses. And I also really enjoyed the organizational behavior courses at LBS, which I think are mostly electives, because it's not just about the technical skills and the industry knowledge. At the end, you're just dealing with people. And I think those organizational behavior skills that are, taught through some of the electives can actually be very insightful, not just for the recruiting process, but for navigating through private equity and doing deals and dealing with people, because it's a huge component of being successful.
Any elective you particularly enjoyed towards the private equity side? You mentioned a few on the energy side.
There's that big PEVC elective. I think it's called PEVC. This is for LBS students. I'm sure Esade has the same one. And yeah, definitely recommended.
Nice. I was going to move the question on to Ankit now to see if he can answer the same thing, but for Esade, I don't know if there's any particular elective you chose at Esade that you remember.
I think one which was particularly important, transitioning into the corporate world was leading change. That was, I believe it was an elective back then. But that particular elective sort of shows you how to think, when you're in a changing environment. And as me and Roman touched upon earlier, that we see that the energy industry is a particularly changing industry over the next decade or so. So I think those are the skills that you would like to have. And of course, general courses, as Roman said, around strategy are very important because these are big organizations that we're talking about. Even the startups nowadays are growing at a phenomenal pace, and they become, let's say, medium-sized organizations very quickly. So I think as a manager or as a professional working in an analyst role or a consultant role, I think having the bigger picture is always important. So you always have to wear two hats. One is the overall umbrella strategic picture hat, where you have to look at things from a 30,000-foot level. And then, of course, you must be prepared to get your hands dirty with the day-to-day groundwork as well. So I think that contrast and that thinking is important for professionals straight out of the MBA, and that's what managers in our positions actually look for. So I think those particular skills are interesting to gather, when you're, let's say, planning your course ahead.
Yeah, nice. Really looking forward. Now I wanted to move on to, I think Roman touched upon it earlier about the specifics of the recruiting process. I think most of the people here in the YouTube link will probably be thinking about joining the energy sector. And as both of you probably know, recruiting in the energy sector happens in a very unstructured way. And I think one of the fears that some people face is I see two particular fears. One is I don't have the necessary experience in the energy sector to be able to join it now. And number two is I'm not an engineer, and everyone in the energy sector is an engineer. So I would like to see your thoughts on this. If I'm not mistaken, Ankit is an engineer and Roman isn't. So maybe if we start from Roman's side, who isn't an engineer, see if this has ever been a problem for him or how he tackled not being an engineer. And then we can move on to Ankit to see his view from the being an engineer side.
Yeah, sure. Well, it really depends what kind of role you want to have within the energy sector, right? So at Suzy Partners, which is an investment fund, as I was saying before, there are some engineers, but most of us are actually not. The background is very varied. You go from people that studied law and are part of the investment team to people that studied business and finance, which is more standard, like I have. You have people that have studied geography, actually. So in terms of what you've studied at school, I don't think that determines what I can speak of is, say, if you want to go in an investment fund, an investment role, renewable energy, you need to have three things. So one is the financial capabilities, right? So valuation, etc. The second one is you need to have some sort of industry knowledge, so renewable energy knowledge. And the third one is that you need to have people skills. So I think that you can learn the financial skills. You certainly learn them in the MBA. I think that the renewable or sector, knowledge, you can also learn it on your own, although it's a little bit harder. I think it's something that you learn while you're in the job. And the people skills, you can just, sort of develop some self-awareness, I'd say, and try to use a little bit of common sense. The barriers that I had, so I did not have the finance skill barrier because I was coming from investment banking. I didn't know much about renewable energy, although I certainly did not portray that when I was interviewing with them. So what I did is, I had a vast interest. So I just spent a lot of time speaking with people, understanding the industry, and just trying to educate myself as much as I could, so that I could sort of be seen as a feasible candidate for just an initial interview. I had done one renewable energy sector deal, and I was working investment banking out of 15 deals. So I made sure to squeeze that knowledge that I had, put it at the top of my CV, make sure that I could be seen as someone that at least has a lot of interest. So like many of you, I was part of the energy club. I was organizing events. I was speaking with colleagues that were in the sector.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to overcome that initial obstacle.
Nice. What about you, Ankit? Anything you can share on this front, being an engineer yourself?
So yes, I can probably say with great conviction that let's say engineering helped me in no way to get a job in energy, and I think it was the MBA as a platform. Of course, when you get into the job, you can understand the technical and the operations aspects of the business a little bit better. But I think that is not a stop. So I think anybody who's interested in the energy sector, and I can say that because I actually had two offers. I had one from the British Petroleum Future Leadership Program. So those guys used to have a program as well back in the day. And I was lucky enough to be selected for that one, but I ended up choosing the Danaher one because of the global scope. But of course, I think what's important is, especially for prospective students looking for jobs within energy, is to pinpoint either through a leadership program or through the careers websites of energy companies on what kind of role do you actually want to do. So generally, the roles that MBAs go into are going to be around project management, around being an analyst. So those are the initial roles. And of course, we do have some consulting opportunities as well. I think, let's say the preparation should be around being prepared for the role rather than the industry in particular. And I think once you can portray that, you have the necessary skills to actually tackle that particular role, because I think the sort of roles that we are looking at are in a particular bracket. So they are mid-level senior roles. And of course, I think having engineering has helped me in no way. It does help you once you're in, but I don't think it's a stopper during the whole recruiting process itself.
Yeah, I could agree. And now I want to talk about the importance of networking. There's been an interesting question in the chat about this as well. So I want to ask this twofold. I want to ask about the importance of networking during the recruitment process, and then the importance of the MBA networking once you're inside the job. So regarding the recruitment process, how much did you have to refer back to networking? Again, I think it's very interesting to have both of your points of views, because from my experience, graduate programs tend to be a little bit more advertised than positions in the finance sector, in the private equity sector. So it'd be interesting to see both of your points. And then looking into the question in the chat from Chota, it'd be great to see how your business school network has played out in your current roles. So I don't know, maybe Ankit, you can kick it off.
So yeah, of course, I'll take that one. I do think that networking is an important aspect through the recruiting process, and of course after you get the job both. Let's say, drawing on my experience during the recruiting process at Danaher, I made it a point to talk. So we have 4 verticals here at Danaher, and so I made it a point when I was recruiting to talk to everybody, especially in that particular vertical, who was an MBA. And generally, what I felt was, if you reach out to about 10 people, 2 or 3 will reply, especially who are MBAs, and they will give you some time to actually take you through. I was actually recruiting for INSEAD a couple of months ago, and I actually spoke with 6 or 7 people, and who were looking to work for Danaher and looking to work in the energy sector. And I'm pretty happy to say that 3 of them have been hired already, and they're colleagues. And of course, now with the graduate program, we have MBAs from all around the world. We have LBS folks. I mean, in Europe, we generally have more or less European MBA folks, and it's really important. from a cadence perspective, I wouldn't say that we get in touch weekly because we simply have not enough time to, sort of nurture our relationships within our MBA network. We do get together once a year at least. We have a GMDP program, which is, of course, let's say not complete without a global conference. And we do have that once a year. This year it is virtual, but of course I do think that, the softwares that we operate on are very innovative nowadays, in which you can have those coffee conversations, have those breakout rooms. And I do make it a point to at least touch in with the India cohort at least once a month, the European cohort at least once a month, and the US cohort at least once a quarter. So I think it's important, just to talk around, to gather some knowledge on how the company is doing, how other MBAs are thinking about things, because sometimes how you're thinking is a very, tunnel vision, and speaking with your peers really does open up your mind. And, I think also what matters is having an open mind to, open your mind to those things, just to have a new and fresh perspective, because things are changing at a rapid pace in the world nowadays, especially accelerated now by COVID. So I think it's an important piece of not just the recruiting process, but even after you're in. But Roman, I would like to hear from you.
Yeah. No, those are interesting points. I agree with you, Ankit. So for me, networking was the reason why I ended up even getting interviews. So I made a point to network with my colleagues at LBS. So everyone in my class knew that I wanted to do sustainable energy investments within the first month. So I think that, that actually got me, just my colleagues were putting me in touch with people that they knew from the energy sector. And that got me into, learning more about the industry. And it actually ended up getting me an internship at Suzy Partners. This happened because one of my friends in my class at LBS, he was working in Zurich before the MBA, and he had interviewed with a guy that worked at a sustainable energy fund that was Zurich based, and he put me in touch. And this guy, he had gone to Booth, so he also had an MBA. So I think once you have an MBA, and touching on that point that you guys were making, it sort of it does, and as an alumni, I can say that it does send the signal to people that, one, you're willing to challenge yourself, that you've wanted to leave your job, move to a different city, go into a 2-year program to make a better self, professionally and personally. So that's something that's very likable, And it turns out that at Suzy Partners, there were 4 people in my team had an MBA from INSEAD. My boss went to LBS, from Chicago Booth. So that definitely made my case a lot more appealing for them to, interview and get in the process. So I think the network goes beyond your own school. When you're doing, when you're working, you're doing deals, you run across people that went to Esade, that went to Columbia. So there's also a network within, people that sort of did an MBA. There's a lot of value to that, because of, what I was saying before, what it signals about someone. So that's something that I can say now, 3 years after graduating. It's definitely a powerful signal.
And I think if I might add to Roman's point there, I think that even during, let's say, my recruitment phase, the recruiters know when you speak to your network, because generally the conversations that you have with MBAs are around the culture of the company, and culture is very important, especially to HR people when they're looking for people who are a fit to a particular role and a particular organizations. I think that the conversations that you will have with your network as you go through the recruiting process really reflect in your interviews. And I think you do get a lot of brownie points from HR on that.
Yeah, nice points. I'd like to follow up to Roman's answer using a question from the chat from Ben, who says that the transition into PE energy is highly competitive. And the question here is, what internships would you suggest pursuing in order to take a step in the right direction? And well, is IB too far from energy or energy too far from P? So I don't know, Roman, if you've got any insights on this one.
That's a good question. I think it depends on your background, right? So I think that if you want to sort of tackle the finance, sort of the three skills I was saying before. So, financial background, industry background, and then people skills. Depending on where you're coming from, you want to do a certain internship or the other, right? So, for example, if you have a very strong sustainable energy background, but you're lagging a bit behind, perhaps on the technicals, or you want to have a more financial flavor to your story, then do an investment banking internship. Citi, for example, has a very strong energy division. I did happen to work at Citi before, so I might be a little bit biased, but their London team is very good, for example. So that will give you sector experience and a financial background. So I don't think it's too far from PE. Ideally, obviously, you want to do a PE internship if that is possible, right? Because it's exactly what you're going for. So. But investment banking is not too far off then. No, I don't think so.
Great. Thanks for the answer. Now to keep the questions coming from the chat, I was reading through them, and then there's a very interesting question from Abhishek, who says that the energy sector is very big. We've been discussing here from a very high level, but maybe we can go a little bit more specific into what kind of roles and what kind of subsectors will be developing in the next 2-3 years, and any particular roles that you think might be interesting. So I don't know, maybe Ankit, you can kick this one off.
Yes, of course. I think now there are two sides of the coin. One is the traditional side, where you have a lot of, let's say, people management roles, which MBAs can look forward to. You have project planning and management, which are on both sides of the traditional sector and the renewable sector. I think project management is becoming more and more important as we understand the complexities around wind and solar as we move on. I think project management, and I think one more role that is very important that is developing, especially in wind and solar, is the analyst role. Because I had a colleague and a classmate from Esade who was actually running a startup on solar analytics out of Germany, and his company basically provides solar farms with analytics around how efficient is their, let's say, setup. Even a speck of dust can, sort of hinder the solar radiation coming in. So my company, Auto Hydromet, we make pyranometers, we make dust IQ systems, which go on top of solar panels, which help you to better analyze your data and how much energy you're capturing. And of course, with the digitization of even the renewable sector, I think the roles around project management, analytics, and of course, environmental consultancy, which sort of helps you navigate the regulatory landscape, and of course, to minimize risks, to minimize waste. So those kind of consultancy roles will be developing over the next years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have a short answer for this one. So I'd say, it's depending on what you like to do. So how you want to dice up the energy sector. If you're a very technical guy and you just have a thing for wind turbines, you can that immediately narrows a lot the energy sector for you. You can go to an OEM, you can go to a developer, you can go into asset management. If you like just a more financial approach to it, which is my case, for example, and I just like investing, in my case, I don't have a specific preference for doing an investment in solar PV or in wind, offshore wind. For me, what really gets me going more is just the investment side of it. So I like actually changing technologies. The technical side of it, it's not what motivates me the most. So I think it's I'm answering the question with the question, it's what makes you tick more. That way you can focus your search.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask yourself. I agree. Moving on, there have been a few questions, two questions actually, on the oil and gas sector. We had a question at the beginning, more of a high-level question about the sector, now one more career-related, which is how do you see the oil and gas companies making this transition? And whether do you guys believe they've got the core competencies they need, or will they have to recruit for new roles? So maybe Ankit, let's see your thoughts on how are oil and gas companies approaching the energy transition.
Traditional companies like British Petroleum, Shell, and of course some players out of China as well, are making a very, let's say, obvious shift into renewables. So slowly and slowly, their footprint on dependency on the traditional sources is going down, and of course the move into renewables is going up. Even within those sectors, and I'm sure that Roman can elaborate a little bit further on that the bigger companies are making investments in renewables instead of having a situation where, like in the automobile industry, where Tesla has come in and has become the biggest player in the world now by market cap. I think the companies in traditional oil and gas would like to avoid that, and I do know because I was interviewing with British Petroleum back in 2018, and I already had some conversations around how the bigger companies are making, let's say, a conscious shift into reducing their dependency on oil and gas. And I do see, of course, slowly, but for managers like us, I think we are answerable to the shareholders, and it comes back to the shift that, because in oil and gas your revenues will go down, so you need alternate avenues of revenue stream where you can actually invest and take those strategic calls. And I think the pivot is already happening in the industry, so it's not a matter of the past. I think it's ongoing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the shift is completely, as Ankit was saying, towards renewables. And the traditional oil and gas companies, they have a lot of cash, frankly, but they also answer to their investors. So they are in a bit of a situation, but they're moving towards the right direction. But obviously they will become, they either transform completely or they will become obsolete. That's my view.
This takes me to probably the hottest topic of the sector at the moment, which is hydrogen. And I wanted to ask you, Roman, where you saw hydrogen right now, the investment in hydrogen. How advanced are we? What sort of investments are you seeing from the private equity side?
Frankly, I haven't seen any. So I think it's a very preliminary stage. Hydrogen as a technology. We frankly we could entertain the idea, but we're focusing more on the more proven sort of technologies for long-term investors. So we would be very careful to pitch to our investment committee hydrogen investments as of now.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Ankit? Where do you see hydrogen at the moment? Are you seeing it in your day-to-day job, or is this something you don't see?
I think that it's a little bit more, let's say, overhyped than the investment flowing into hydrogen. I do know that there's a couple of conferences coming up this year on hydrogens. I think Reuters is holding one on hydrogen 2021. I think we're in the infancy stages of hydrogen as an energy source. You see that not only in the energy sector, but you see that in automobiles as well, where hydrogen fuel cells are being considered as an alternate source. And we do have some, let's say, good initial prototypes and even products in the market now, which are proof of concept. So I think the infrastructure around that will also determine how much money is poured into this particular sector, but I still do think that it's in the infancy stage. So a lot, let's say, remains to be seen over the next couple of years on how that develops.
Yeah, interesting. And talking more about your day-to-day jobs now that we're talking about the topics you're seeing in your day-to-day life, could you share with us a very interesting or a particular deal or a particular project you've been working in recently that you particularly like, you've really enjoyed, and you think is worth sharing with us? I don't know, Ankit can start maybe.
So interestingly enough, I was just, let's say, the core team of an acquisition that we did. It was a fairly large company called Aquatics Informatics, and they deal with natural water, hydrology, surface water, groundwater, and it was around about a $50 million deal. And I think, let's say, the integration of that whole portfolio, and it is a digital software company. So basically, they make analytics software to analyze testing points. I think they have 10,000 testing points already, which is installed, let's say, data loggers with the US Geological Survey. And that's something very interesting because, as I said in the beginning, we see a clear trend moving towards the digitization of the whole industry, whether it be traditional energy or whether it be renewables. And I do think that, digitization is the future. And I was involved in, let's say, the integration of that company into the water quality platform at Danaher already. And some nice learnings were coming out of that.
Nice.
Cool.
Roman?
Yeah, I was just thinking of, because you asked for an interesting one, right, Ignacio?
Yeah, well,
no,
I'm sure you
look,
have many interesting ones, right? I'm sure.
No, I'm working on something now. So it started as an investment thesis that I'm trying to prove, right? So I have an investment idea, which could be a fund investment that we could make. And right now I'm in the stage of investment thesis so that I can sort of prove to my investment committee that this is something feasible so that they'll give me time to do it and execute it. What's interesting about the thesis is that there is no deal, is that it's a deal that I need to come up with myself from scratch. So there's not a specific company that is being sold. There's not a specific asset that's, on the market for sale. There's no local management team. There's nothing. So I need to put all these pieces together myself. So it's without getting into too many details, what's interesting about it is that I'm pitching to my committee that we need to go in, for example, we need to go into Italy, and we need to start buying all these kinds of assets. And I have no idea how I'm going to get in touch with whoever's selling them. We're going to put together some sort of management team that's local because, we're based in Switzerland. And then we're going to, reconvert these assets into something completely different. And then we're going to leverage them and structure this and that and then sell them. But I don't have any of these pieces whatsoever, So what's interesting about it is that I have to work with my team to see if, how we build this. So we probably need to go to Italy. We need to start speaking with people. We need to find the right people to help us and sort of build everything from scratch. So, I find it quite challenging, but it's also very fun, frankly. So that's a deal I'm currently working on right now.
Nice. I'm sure we all agree that was very interesting, Roman. So thanks for that. I'm mindful of time now, so I think one last question for both of you. We're all, or most of the people here listening to you were during our MBA studies. So my question to you is, if you were to come back to the MBA, is there anything you would have done differently, or is there one tip that you wish you would have received at the beginning and you could probably share with us? I don't know, Roman, maybe you can kick us out for this one.
Look, I'd say I guess 2 tips and focused on, on going to P. So the first one I'd say is be focused. I think that if you if you want to go into PE, but you end up doing interviews for a marketing gig, that you're going to do a part-time internship in term 2, I think you're not focusing enough. So like eyes on the prize, I'd say. And then the second one is have a little bit of patience as well. I know that there's a rush to line up internships, and there's a rush to get a job offer before June, but I think that these things take a little bit of time, and you just have to be a little bit patient, eager but patient.
And I would say that have an open mind, because you never know where you're going to end up. But be focused at the same time, as Roman said already, because if you want to end up in a role in corporate and you're doing some kind of, let's say, an investment banking internship, you're not going to get to where you want. Have a longer goal than just after your MBA. So the journey doesn't end as soon as you get your role. The journey is just beginning again. And of course, if you want to get to a general management position, most people out of the MBA, I've been interviewing a couple of people already, they do not know how to run a company. You have to learn those skills. You have to move from role to role, working in sales, working in operations, working in finance. If you want to go into a particular general management role, you have to learn those skills as you go along. So have a long-term goal. Don't just think about what you want to do after your MBA, but have a sort of a longer perspective on 5 years, 8 years, on what you really enjoy doing. And of course, the world is open for so much opportunity. I think the brand that we have in the top 20 MBAs of the world, it's unbelievable. Whenever somebody speaks with you, whenever they know where you're from, they speak with you, and they really think that you know a lot of things about running a business. Let's say focus on your subjects, focus on the courses, because they do give you a vast amount of knowledge, especially the core ones, and take the electives that sort of are parallel to the role that you want to be in. Be focused, as Roman said, and of course have a long-term goal. Those are my 2 recommendations.
Nice. I think those are amazing tips and amazing thoughts. So thank you very much. I think this is it from my side. Ankit, Roman, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for setting aside 1 hour for us. Thank you so much for sharing your insights about your MBA and about your current career. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Now I am going to hand over back to Ayal for a couple of closing remarks. That's it from my side. Once again, Roman and Kit, thank you very much. Really good forward.
Thanks, Ignacio and team.
Thank you, Ignacio.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have Ankit and Roman, who dedicated this time to give us enlightening tips for pursuing a post-MBA career in the energy sector. Thank you for coming on board, and thank you, Ignacio, for mediating the panel. Many thanks also to Monique, Miloni, and Naomi for all the work from behind the scenes that enabled the success of this event. This was the first event in a series of collaboration events of the career centers and the energy clubs, so stay tuned. Stay tuned for our future announcements regarding the next event.
All right.